on the Doctor.
Franchises hailing from the small island of the UK that have taken their place in hearts and minds of many nerds for decades on end. Warhammer 40k, the grim darkness of the far future, and Doctor Who, which covers all of space and time but conveniently spends most of its plot dealing in 20th century London. And it's my job to haphazardly jam these convoluted sci-fi series into one another and see just what would happen. Welcome, all you beautiful ladies and animals, to another episode of Let's Throw Some Random Crap at 40k and see what happens. As always, if you like this video and want even more, subscribe to the channel and give the video a like, but without further ado, let's just get right into it. Let's make sure everyone's on the same page. Warhammer 40k and Doctor Who are both iconic UK sci-fi giants, but they sit at very different tables. One's a gothic bloodbath where hope is heresy, and the other is a time-traveling drama about a space wizard with a screwdriver and deep abandonment issues. So let's break down the basics, because if you don't know your Cybermen from your tech priest, you're gonna get whiplash really fast with the litany of vocabulary items in this video. Warhammer 40k is a tabletop board game with a lot of books and games all surrounding it to make you excited about spending thousands of dollars on plastic crack. Beginning in the 80s, most of it centers around the idea of grimdark, where the worst thing you can imagine happens in the worst way possible. Everything sucks, everybody's constantly fighting, and it's literally impossible to win. Hoorah! Most of its stories take the rule of cool and just run with that, often opting for the most extreme outcome rather than the most rational or even plausible. And that's what makes it fun. Doctor Who, on the other hand, is much more traditionally contrived, a sci-fi series that began in the 60s, dropped off around the 70s, and came back in the noughties for a sequel show that's done surprisingly well, blending goofy sci-fi hijinks with a dash of horror-light concepts and time travel nonsense that is more built around convenience than honoring rules. But when done well, it scratches that cosmic itch just right and offers a lot of interesting concepts. Now, for our matchups today, I'll be throwing some of Doctor Who's most recognizable aliens, not the most powerful per se, but the most famous, into Warhammer 40k, because where Doctor Who is made up of a timeline constantly in flux and really changes the status quo of the universe or even dimensions between writers, seasons, and the many faces of the Doctor, 40k, while still wacky, is on a much more defined timeline. We know what happens, and it doesn't shift around too much. Or well, I don't have to do as much homework to make sure that it all lines up. Trying to make sense of Doctor Who's continuity is like trying to alphabetize a black hole. Time is less of a straight line and more of a spaghetti fight in a mirror factory. Characters die, undie, loop back, regenerate, and sometimes just stop existing because the plot needed a break. So when we talk about factions or enemies, we're pulling from across decades of TV, retcons, Big Finish audio dramas, and fever dreams. So most of the time you just sort of gotta roll with it. I'm going to be aiming for the peak of each of these alien empires, but know that their history with the show is constantly in flux. And while not a Whovian expert, I do know there are some inherently more powerful creatures within the Doctor Who universe, but like I said, we're aiming for the more recognizable aliens, rather than just straight out most powerful. And also, like, I'm not taking this very seriously. We're talking about campy aliens from a British TV drama with whiskers for laser guns in a board game where toy soldiers have books written about them just to make sure they sell well. To be fair, it's working. But I just say that to say it's all fandom, random bullshit, and it isn't something I'm taking necessarily super seriously. I'm not big on the hardcore power scale conversations out there on the internet. It's just fun to think about some of these matchups and how wacky these universes would be if they happen to intersect. All this should go without saying, but prepare for lore, which includes spoilers for the show of Doctor Who and some of the lore from 40k.
One small step for man.
Let's kick off the rogues gallery with the silence. Creepy, faceless men in suits that you instantly forget the moment you stop looking at them. They're like the Men in Black, if the Men in Black were gaslighting reality itself. These guys didn't just influence history, they were history, and no one remembers. So how would a psychic race that thrives on oblivion fare in a universe where demons, psychers, and inquisitors fight for control of the human soul? It honestly depends on who or what they're going against. See, the silence work by erasing your memory of them as soon as your eyes are off of them. But this only works on living beings that have a memory to be deja vu'd. Humans, even Astartes, could not remember a silence if they lose track of them, but something like Necrons, machines of war without mortal minds, or even some of the Mechanicus, the Ironkin of the Votan, these would all be hard counters against the silence's main gimmick. It's hard to erase the mind of a camera. Instead, things like Necrons would just remember what they're looking at. Even some humans in Doctor Who could remember the silence with ocular implants, so even then, regular humans and space marines with augmented eyes may be able to remember them too. It all depends on how good their memory is stored in regards to their associated cyber eyes. Now, the less important factor to consider is that the Doctor in Doctor Who is a pacifist, quote unquote. And for the most part, so are his allies. So when facing the silence, he has to do something clever, like subconsciously forcing all of humanity to clear out the silence by hiding them in footage of Apollo 11. For basically anyone in 40k, the regular strategy is shoot first, ask maybe later. These men of grey that scream like demons and shoot lightning, yeah, they're just getting a bolter to the face. They won't have a chance for the Astartes to lose sight of them to begin with. Now, a silence could make a very interesting character within 40k, working alongside diplomats and handling things for the Imperium as they do the Papal mainframe, a giant space megachurch in Doctor Who, but as a force attempting to build themselves up, their nature of forgetfulness is kind of just made lame by the amount of raw tech and straightforward battle tactics of 40k's armies. That being said, they'd likely do the best against orcs, too stupid to understand or unravel the plots of the silence. In the same way they had guided humanity in the universe of Doctor Who, a whole orcish war, with a shadow government of aliens you can't remember leading the charge from behind a curtain, that would be a spell for disaster. Not changing the status quo, but an interesting addition that would shake up the universe on the small scale. Whether or not they would be wholesale obliterated, I'll leave that up to you. A lot of these I'm not going to go into the full, who wins, Doctor Who or Warhammer, just sort of opening the door and introducing some cool concepts, and then if you want to take it further in the comments, leave it down below. I read the comments all the time, and I love seeing people's own speculations on this very thing. But with that out of the way, let's keep going.
When they are seen by any other living creature, they freeze into rock. No choice, it's a fact of their biology.
Weeping Angels, the horror movie villain that made us all scared of public statues. These quantum-locked nightmares can't move while you're looking, but blink and they'll send you back in time to die slowly. They feed off time energy like it's soul juice. In 40k terms, they're like Catan that specialize in psychological warfare and turning entire cities into their playgrounds. Basically, a perfect fit for a galaxy where looking the wrong way can already get you killed. Now, like the Silence, the Angels are not exactly going to be making any galaxy-changing moves, but a pack of them could survive, if not thrive, in a hive city for eons, as they hunt by sending people back in time and feeding on the energy generated by the life you're now missing out on. With trillions of batteries to choose from on a single planet, they'd be totally set, and likely, the rest of the Imperium would know none the wiser. If anything, they may end up acting as a sort of pest control, like spiders keeping the roach population down. Can't start a chaos cult if all your members get thrown wildly back in time. Or a pack of gene stealers when your leaders are getting shoved into a time closet. Never able to carry out their plans, not only would the Angels go unnoticed, they may actually be good for Imperial hive cities. For smaller, more intimate communities, they would become a more pressing threat, chewing through entire starships because while quantum locked or being observed, they are impervious to damage up to the core of a star. Unless you delete them from existence entirely or just wait a few thousand years for them to starve to death, they're not going anywhere. Or like when they were first introduced, you trick them into looking at one another and locking themselves in place, as the quantum states are involuntary on the side of the Angels. For many factions, abandoning the Angels on some backwater planet or moon, or quarantining it for a few thousand years, effectively ignoring the problem until it goes away, would be the most convenient option. But in a place like hive cities, which are covered in temples, which are then also covered in statues, a small army of weeping angels in a hive city would thrive. No way to be defeated, and no one within the Imperium is gonna blink at a few hundred factory workers who disappear out of the blue. Human lives are expendable in the Imperium, and the Angels' food, it just sort of becomes a rounding error. The Cybermen are what happens when transhumanism gets a little too excited. Strip away your emotions, replace your squishy bits with metal, and boom, you're in the club. They're relentless, adaptable, and they want you to be like them. Sound familiar? And depending on the version, they can range from slightly annoying to unstoppable planetary extinction event. From basic Cybermen that are taken out by humanity on a 2012 Earth, to a race of supremacy Cybermen who engineer an aromatic virus that converts all humans into Cybermen just by coming into contact with it, using Time Lord technology to dominate entire universes. Yes, versus plural. Think Nurgle's plagues that turn people into goo, but instead it transforms an entire hive world into an army of fortified, unthinking men of iron within a matter of hours. An invasion more efficient than the Tyranids. While an individual Cyberman might be right around, if not weaker, than the standard Necron warrior, but if you can recruit trillions at a time from any human hive city, the number advantage starts to lean in their favor. Not to mention what the Cybermen could do with Imperial or even Necron tech, upgrading their tech virus to override and upgrade entire worlds at the drop of a hat, turning entire hive cities into legions of super soldiers akin to the Men of Iron. And it's not just humanity at stake, as all humanoids in the galaxy, the Eldar and the Votan and the Tau, would be threatened at the same level. Tyranids would be stopped at a halt as the Cybermen, made of metal, don't offer enough biomass for the effort it would take to harvest what little may lie in the suit from them. The only 40k factions that could challenge the supreme Cybermen are Necrons, who may be talented enough to fight back and reprogram the Cybermen for their own purposes, or Chaos, turning the Cybermen's growing powers to transform them into a massive legion of savage machine spirits paired with demonkind. But by the time they're successful, the Cybermen would have upgraded the entire Milky Way galaxy and would have been moving on to galaxies outside of it. The only way you could battle their technoplague would be to stall it, like the Tyranids, Necrons, and Men of Iron all wrapped into one horrible army, sweeping through the galaxy. Hell, even in the Doctor Who comic where the Supreme Cybermen originated from, the solution to stopping their threat was pulling some convoluted Time Lord magic out of nowhere to literally reset the entire universe. Something that no factions in 40k could pull off.
Declared war upon the Cybermen.
This is not war, this is pest control!
The Daleks are crown jewels of Doctor Who villainy. Xenophobic tanks with plungers, somehow both ridiculous and absolutely terrifying, created for one purpose: genocide. They turned an entire time war into a reality-shattering apocalypse. Imagine Necrons if they had a baby with the Black Templars. Nothing but hate in their hearts and immense technology at their feet. Wheels. Whatever they roll around on. Now, again, like the Cybermen, the Daleks can range wildly in power depending on when you catch them. Some can be gunned down with traditional gunfire. Others scoff at the sight of nuclear bombs. Those that fought in the Time War against Gallifrey, a Dalek army numbering into a billion strong, were more along the nuclear defiance kind. And the Time War Dalek Empire is what we're throwing into 40k. Atomizing weapons and a bomb so strong it would annihilate reality, if not multiple realities, if misused. Take the Necron Celestial Array, the Sun Killer, and scale it up a few hundred times, if not a few thousand times. These are the Daleks, who destroy entire galaxies just to use it like a battery. Daleks, whose own war in heaven needed to be frozen, literally a slice of time separated and put to the side so that it didn't destroy all of reality. It didn't take one doctor doing some contrived sci-fi wackiness, but 13 separate doctors basically having to step in and mutually bring an end to both sides of the Time War's conflict. Compared to the Necrons' war in heaven, which was able to conclude, and reality just sort of kept on chugging. Now, the greatest difference from Gallifrey to 40k is that the Time Lords were essentially a race of congressmen. They were always high on their own farts and lethargic when it came to responding to a real threat, so overconfident in their superiority. The Daleks were not so much more technologically superior to the Time Lords, more so they were good enough and bloodthirsty enough that the lax style of governance over Gallifrey led to the Time Lords being thrown off balance. Against a species more primed for war, the Imperium of Man or the Necrons, the Daleks would be facing a different opponent. They'd be facing armies that have a thirst for blood all the same. But even still, their immense multi-galactic scale of tech would see them outscaling the 40k armies that are just localized in the Milky Way. But there's one crucial weakness in their armor and hatred. In their fleshy core of the shells. See, Daleks are not machines like the Cybermen. They are not automatons. They are living, breathing cyborgs. Their contempt and rage is real and tangible. Not only do they outscale most of the armies of 40k from a pure technological level, being on par if not above the Dark Age of technology and the Necron Empire at their peaks, but they're alive. And with the everlasting hatred and fury the Daleks hold in their hearts, their arrival in the far future is like a massive blood-soaked lighthouse for Khorne. Of those billions upon billions, the Daleks, for better or worse, would find themselves going down the rabbit hole of Khornate worship. Then the real question becomes, does that make them more dominant in the 40k universe? Or do they begin to turn on one another and cannibalize the Empire from the inside out, like the Great Horus Heresy, which saw humanity falling so far into the depths of depravity? The Daleks may be condemned to the same fate, but on a level far greater. Not a million Astartes turned to chaos, but a countless billions of Daleks waging civil war across the Milky Way, exterminating everything in their path, if not erasing reality alongside it as well. Talk about a spicy pepper shaker.
Dear God, 3 of them. All my worst nightmares at once.
But finally, let's talk about the home team. The Time Lords of Gallifrey are the kind of arrogant ancient civilization that would look down on the Emperor for being too reckless. With their mastery over time, reality, and smug superiority, they're also the type to sit out a multiversal war just to prove a point. But when pushed, they can deploy weapons that make Exterminatus look like a warning shot. For a brief rundown, the Time Lords are some of the oldest beings in the universe of Doctor Who, technologically superior to the point that the laws of reality were written and controlled by them and them alone. They seeded many a civilization and at their peak would make the Emperor of Mankind look like a first-year student at university. They were literally untouchable, able to go back in time or forward in time and control reality in a way that no one else could. The Imperium of Man could barely take a single galaxy during the years of the Great Crusade and eventually collapsed under its own weight, while the Time Lords colonized most of the observable universe. With a lot of sci-fi factions, we end up seeing a loser in regards to Warhammer because, like 40k, so many stories focus on a single galaxy, a single army. The Time Lords, however, are no galactic empire, but rather a universal one that could dictate the laws of reality and beyond from Gallifrey. The only reason their dominant hold on the universe was threatened was because the Daleks had become such a powerful thorn in their side, both of whom could use time travel, of which the Time Lords would be overconfident in their victory before their enemies began to put the pressure on. Now, their stalemate with the Daleks wasn't forced by the Doctor because one side or the other would have won, but because reality would have lost. We've briefly sped past it when talking about Daleks, but the Time War, the war in heaven of Doctor Who, was leagues away from the powers used in the Necrons' heavenly war. Not that Warhammer's War in Heaven wasn't grandiose, with machines that ate stars and weapons that fired upon the bounds of reality itself. But the Time Wars, the multiple wars in heaven, waged between the Time Lords and the Daleks in past and future, the rest of reality was threatened and was also caught in the balance. A few Time Lords even wanted to sacrifice the universe so they could live on, and instead found themselves, and the rest of the Time War, trapped within a slice of reality removed from the timeline itself. It's complex, I know, but if I were to go over the entire Time War, we'd be here for a 12-hour video. But all that to say that no matter how weak a Time Lord may be in their 13 lives of a few thousand years each, no creature in 40k could touch them or their time-traveling TARDIS machines. Even if they could attempt to pose a threat to Gallifrey, the Time Lords could write them out of reality before they even existed. The only way to fight the Time Lords in any effective manner is to use time travel yourself, or just delete reality, which none of the factions in 40k really seem to be capable of. The Necrons come close, and while on the scale of 40k their time travel and space fuckery is impressive, compared to Gallifrey, who writes the laws of physics, it's again like a 6th grader trying to explain gravity to a supercomputer. Ironic, because the supercomputers in 40k's case are the 6th grader in this scenario. Even Chaos, with technology unlike nothing else, there's no telling how advanced the Pylon network, which had shut off the Chaos tap for millenniums, could be in the hands of the Time Lords. If Necrons could cancel out the warp, the Time Lords would most certainly be able to do the same, as long as they were able to get it done fast enough, although fast doesn't really mean anything to time travelers. Hell, it may even be deemed that Chaos is too bad to exist and the Time Lords would just move to a different universe and leave this chaos-infested one behind to die out. The only problem that could be posed to the Time Lords is their own existence being turned on itself. If Necrons somehow got their hands on Gallifreyan tech and started a war in heaven worse than their own or even the Daleks' war, or if Chaos could find a rogue Time Lord, like the Master or the Doctor, and corrupt them into being an absolute force of destruction and blasphemy with the laws of reality at their fingertips. But otherwise, the Time Lords would be able to control and abide in the Warhammer 40k universe just as they had in their own for eons up until the Time War. Now yes, could a single Astartes gun down a Time Lord? Yeah, easily. The problem is not that the Time Lords are untouchable, but it's how they wage war. Their wars are not fought on the battlefield where they stand shoulder to shoulder with guns in hand, but their wars are fought over the entire universe where they play and abuse the laws of reality to work exactly into their favor. You could shoot a Time Lord, but you'd have to find exactly where, when, and how against an enemy that can control the very physics you're using to construct the weapon you want to use against them. You could probably call it cheating, but when you write the rules, is it even possible to cheat?
If you value your continued existence, if you have any plans about seeing tomorrow, there's one thing you never ever put in a trap.
And what would that be, sir?
And finally, the wild card, the Doctor, a rogue Time Lord, a cosmic hobo, a chaos agent with a PhD in cleverness and many contrived moral gray areas. Equal parts Messiah and Madman, the Doctor always finds a way, no matter the odds. In the 40k universe, they're less of a hero and more of a cataclysm with a conscience. Now, the Doctor is an enigma all unto themselves. Coming in a splattering of 15 faces or so, the specific one you're talking about is going to make a bit of a difference, although a few things remain constant across all of the variations. The Doctor loves to learn and explore and see the galaxy, but also cares about life, human life, seemingly more. He's a pacifist in that he won't stab or shoot you, but if you just so happen to be non-living or find yourself standing under a piano comedically strung up over the sidewalk, he won't pull back from letting it fall, or just getting someone else to shoot you instead. Now, with the TARDIS, catching the Doctor in a corner is next to impossible. He has to basically choose how to engage you in any conflict. And you can't just nuke his phone box because, well, we've seen it take multiversal explosions and just sort of not care. Of course, the pen is the worst enemy of the Doctor. They only really lose when the script says that they have to. But for the most part, the Doctor follows the same logic of warfare that the Time Lords do. They're just on their own set of rules beyond that. The Doctor doesn't have to square up and duke it out with you. If they really wanted to, they could go back in time and make it you never existed. The Doctor is the one who deployed the Moment, a bomb so complex it developed consciousness as a side effect to judge you before you used it. A weapon that was also going to destroy both sides of the Time War until he decided to freeze it instead. If he wanted to, the Doctor could force Big E to take a phone call with himself on the throne and stop the Horus Heresy. Rules of logic and reality just don't apply when you have the powers of convenience and plot armor. Again, like with the Time Lords as a whole, you could just gun down the Doctor. They can be killed. Although, 11 did destroy a Dalek mothership just from regenerating, so even if you do shoot them, there's no guarantee you won't be evaporated in the next instant, letting the Doctor escape right after they regenerate. But this isn't a foe you need to beat in a duel. This is a person, a criminal, a hero, a wizard of proportions untold who always has the author on their side. And even rebooting the universe if the situation is dire enough is not out of the question for them. So chaos can't even really pass through here. We're talking about a guy who can out-trick Tzeentch, a mind that can pass up the Emperor of Mankind, and all of that in a box that can go anywhere at any time, and make it so that time doesn't even carry out as it always had. You know that Dalek reality bomb that just sort of ends everything? We can see Donna Noble, one of the Doctor's companions, who ends up getting the Doctor's intelligence, defuse it in a matter of seconds. This is the guy who, on a whim in the 11th hour, made a living computer virus to take over every computer clock on Earth in a matter of minutes. Maybe a little low on the end of things we've talked about so far, but imagine that kind of virus with a dark streak being set across Mars or any Necron tomb world. This is a guy who fakes his way into a series of history books just to get someone's attention. He has all of time and space at his fingertips, even if he didn't want to confront the 40k universe, even if they knew he existed. What can the Emperor of Mankind do against a dude just chilling out a few galaxies over? Not very much. The dude can speak dinosaur, whatever that means. Half his foes, aliens from other dimensions, turn and run hearing his names. Not to give the British a win, but the Doctor is just so overpowered by plot shenanigans, it comes all the way around to being kind of cool again. But that being said, unless the plot is really against him, there is no way for the Doctor to lose, because we need to make at least one more season and drag this 60-something-year-old show into the 41st millennium.
Point a gun at me if it helps you relax.
We're only human.
But with that, our little foray into throwing some of Britain's top sci-fi space opera icons at one another comes to an end. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised going into this. Doctor Who tends to feel small with its intimate episodes that only really cover a handful of people in any adventure at a time. But starting to delve into the deeper bits of lore, especially around the Time War and the Time Lords in depth, it really surprised me. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of Ben 10 when I learned just how insane the Omnitrix could be in the face of Warhammer 40k's admittedly equal stupidness, but on a smaller level. Maybe in the future we'll do a follow-up, looking at some of the more crazier or more niche Doctor Who aliens and compare them to Warhammer 40k. But for now, that'll be it. As always, I want to give a great big thank you to all my channel members and patrons for supporting what I do. If you want to join this busty crew, you can do so for just $1 a month to get videos earlier than everyone else. Also down below, you can find my Discord. It's totally free and where I announce all new videos and streams, as well as a place where you can find like-minded nerds to play games or chat with to your heart's desire. But that'll be it for me. As always, stay cool, have fun, and be awesome. Buster out.